his engineering degree, Marty met the love of his life.
If you had a minute or two to describe the love story of Colleen and Marty, from the day you met to the day you said your vows, what's the story you tell?
Marty was very well known. He was a star football player and basketball player for the high school.
So that didn't hurt?
That didn't hurt at all. He had come to Albertsons, where I was a clerk, on a late night, and as Marty tells it later, he told his roommates on the way out of there that, hey, she was kind of cute.
Was it rockets, or was this a slow progression over time?
I would call it rockets. The first time I laid eyes on Marty, I would have never guessed that by June that next year, we would be married.
After a whirlwind romance, the newlyweds settled down, and Marty began to start the life.
When you think back to seeing him with his boys, what image do you see?
It's kind of this completeness. It's, I think, what he longed for. Johnny was his first biological relative that he knew, because we were adopted. And I think that really, I know it meant something to him.
We had 2 little babies, and Marty couldn't have been happier. Johnny is his dad. Johnny has his dad's smile and laugh, and they just loved being together. I loved to crochet back then, and so I crocheted Johnny a cute, multicolored snow hat, and Marty loved it. So he asked me to make him a hat to match, and the 2 of them would wear their matching little hats, and I just thought it was so cute.
October 16th, 1987.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that day.
That afternoon, Marty called and asked if we wanted to go to the high school football game that night. It was getting close to 5 o'clock, and I just told him, you know, it's so hard to find a babysitter on a Friday night, and so let's just do something tomorrow night. But, you know, Marty, he knew everybody in town, so he decided to go to the game by himself.
Not unusual for him to do something like that.
No, not unusual at all. I just went to bed thinking he'd come in at some point.
But he didn't.
But he didn't. And so then, of course, the thing that goes through my mind is, okay, he drank way too much. And so he's passed out somewhere in a friend's house, and so we'll find him.
So you weren't thinking something was wrong,
No.
just that he had gone out and just let the time slip away?
Yeah. But then, as the morning ran on and nobody knew where he was, then the concern started.
According to one of Marty's friends, after the game they drove Marty's car here, a local bar called the Golden West Lounge. But shortly after midnight, his friend caught leaving Marty at the bar alone. It was the last time anyone had seen him.
They found his car unlocked, and actually our dog was still in the car, which was odd. And we knew that there wasn't any kind of a robbery gone wrong because there was cash in the car still.
So you have the car, cash, dog. No Marty.
No.
With no sign of the young dad in over 16 hours, his family knew it was time to call the police. Custer County Sheriff Tony Harbaugh had known Marty for years. He would coordinate the search.
This is what was the Golden West Lounge at that time. This is really where the investigation kicked off from. And that was our last known place that Marty had been seen.
Where was Marty's car?
Well, from here, actually it was just right down the side street, about a block or block and a half west of it.
Sheriff Harbaugh questioned those who may have seen Marty at the bar or had any clues to his whereabouts.
You put together the events that night. What could you piece together?
After he had been here a while, he apparently decided to leave the bar. We assumed to find his vehicle and head for home, or maybe to seek a ride to get home.
But according to workers at the bar, Marty never made it to his car.
Apparently Marty had gotten in a black car with 4 Native Americans, 2 males and 2 females. It looked like they'd offered him a ride and he'd willingly got in a vehicle.
Any names?
That was it.
Nicknames?
No names, nothing.
Any indication that Marty knew the people he got into the car with before that night?
None really from witnesses. That really kind of put everyone on edge that has something serious happened? Has there been foul play?
Sheriff Harbaugh wasted no time recruiting people to help in the search, starting with this dirt road heading out of town.
What led you to this particular road?
The Tongue River Road is really the shortest route back to the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. We assumed that Native Americans in Miles City, and they were attempting to flee for whatever reason, that this would be one of the routes. I sent some volunteers and told them to search it thoroughly, use their flashlights and take a close look at anything that might bear looking at.
So you're out here in the dark.
Yes.
On the empty back roads of Montana, even the smallest piece of litter stands out. When volunteers spotted something out of place, they decided to take a closer look.
So what made them stop here?
Well, it's late at night. They'd come up the road. They had picked up an empty beer carton a few miles back. And when they arrived in this area, their headlights reflected on something in the road, possibly a rag, possibly a piece of cloth or something. And it bore out further investigation.
They see it in the brush, in the road?
It was kind of on the shoulder of the road, so it was going to be visible in their headlights, but really nothing more than that.
And when they picked up that cloth, what did they see?
Well, that it was an item of clothing, and that it had stains of some sort on it.
What did those stains appear to be?
When my officers returned with the clothing, I would have said it appeared to be blood.
Miles City, Montana, 1987. Almost a full day after 23-year-old Marty Etchemendy was last seen leaving a local bar, investigators discovered a blood-stained piece of clothing, which they feared may be related to his disappearance. Dennis Corbin, the deputy county attorney at the time, was there for each step of the investigation. And like so many in this town, he had a personal connection to Marty.
Back in those days, I played golf at the country club for Miles City, and Marty played golf. And I drank a few beers with him, and I knew his dad real well, John. So, we're close to the family.
When Marty Etchemendy went missing, tell me about how you first got involved.
They brought the rag, they thought, back, and they brought it up to me and said, Dennis, you're going to go over and talk to Colleen and see if she knows anything about it. And of course, we know where the house is. Knock on the door, and she came into the room, and I'll never forget, she just screamed and hit the ground.
As soon as they pulled it out and showed me, I knew exactly what it was, and it was Marty's boxer shorts. And it looked to have blood on it.
Where did your head go then?
My head went to, he's hurt, and now maybe he has no clothes. Kept going through the scenarios of how we'll find him, where we'll find him, that I will have a blanket and I will have a coat and I will have something to keep him warm. And I think as long as he was cold, he was alive.
It was October in Montana, and overnight temperatures were already below freezing. Without clothes and possibly injured, Marty might only have a few hours before succumbing to hypothermia. Time was of the essence.
I can only imagine the clock is ticking even more.
That really sped things up. We had more reason to believe that his life was certainly in danger.
Where does this search go?
We had a direction of travel now, and that was critical to our search.
Which is right down here.
Correct, yeah. It was all hands on deck. It was reach out to the authorities on the other end in Rosebud County, to state agencies, to federal agencies. We were increasing that urgency.
And within hours of expanding the search, police had their first solid lead. A woman named Doretta Forbear came forward and claimed to have been in the black car spotted in front of the Golden West Lounge. And she admitted to giving a ride to a man matching Marty's description. With her were 3 other Native Americans, Lester Kills on top, his brother Vernon, and a woman named Diane Bullcoming.
We believed they were going to rob him and that they needed to get him in the car. And so they did that, we believe, under the ruse that, it was clear that Marty was looking for his vehicle and they were going to help him find his vehicle.
What happened in the car was that they got about 10 miles out of town, and Marty started to worry and said that he had to go to the bathroom. And they didn't want to, but they pulled over and they let him out. Then Marty took off running. And when he didn't get very far, Lester ran him down.
Lester Kills on top.
Yeah, Lester Kills on top. And Lester just kicked him and kicked, and he was wearing cowboy boots. And then Vern started beating him up.
Just because.
Just because. So then made him take his clothes off, and they put him in the trunk.
After arriving back at the reservation, Doretta Forbear fled the scene, leaving the car and Marty Etchebendi behind.
She knew that they'd beaten him up pretty bad. She knew something bad was going to happen, and she was already in serious trouble.
When she left them, where was Marty?
In the trunk of the car.
But he was alive.
Yes.
So when this woman, Doretta Forbear, finally reaches out and gives us information, this is Sunday. I mean, he's been gone for days.
You know, if she would have reported it right after she got out of the car, at least we would have known what we're looking for. But she didn't. She was so scared of those boys finding her that she didn't report it until the next morning.
In her interview with police, Forbear identified the other suspects in Marty's abduction. But their plans and whereabouts after she left the car remained a mystery. According to her, they could be anywhere.
Based on that information, there's not much hope left.
You know, you hold out all hope and as long as you can. So you're not ready to change from a search and rescue over to a search and recovery quite yet.
The first 48 hours of any missing persons case are critical. Outside that window, their chances of finding Marty alive dramatically decline. And by Sunday morning, he'd been missing for just under 32 hours, turning the search into a literal race against time. Roughly 135 miles away from Miles City, and a day and a half after Marty was last seen, authorities in Yellowstone County briefed their deputies, including Ken Best.
So what was the information that you got at the briefing that morning?
We were told that Custer County was looking for a black duster that had abducted a male from a bar parking lot, and that the victim could possibly still be in the trunk of the car.
So once you get out in your car, what happened?
I just hit the street. I was going through town. Within 5 minutes of leaving our briefing, I passed that vehicle.
And it's just right along the road here?
Yeah, it was going this direction, and I was going the opposite direction. I got behind it as quick as I could. I pulled the car over and waited for my backup to arrive.
If they've done what you're being told they've done, the stakes are pretty high for them, and that affects your safety too.
It does, because these people obviously have nothing to lose. We approached the car. ID'd all the people inside. One of the people was a Vernon Kills on top. And he had the darkest, coldest eyes that we've ever seen.
He's with a man and a woman unfamiliar to the case.
Once you got the three people out of that car, walk me through the next steps.
I was talking to Vernon Kills on top on one side of the car. And while I was looking through his belongings that he handed me, I found another driver's license in his possession.
What was the name on that license?
That was John Martin Benjamin.
So one, you know you have one of the people that the police are looking for an abduction. Two, now you have the identification of the man that you know has been abducted. So now it's only that trunk that's left. Tell me what is going through your mind as you walk up to that trunk.
You hope you can find the victim in there alive, not injured. You hope you don't have to open the trunk and discover the deceased victim. And all you can do is pray for the best. So we get the keys out of the ignition. With a lot of hesitation, we open the trunk. Immediately, we noticed blood in the trunk, a little tissue. We knew that the victim had probably been in that trunk, but no longer was.
Pending an investigation, 3 people were taken into custody there on assault charges out of Miles City. There was a possibility that there could have been a body in the trunk of the car. There was not.
But there was some blood.
There was blood.
Once in custody, Vernon Kills on top did not give any details that would incriminate him or his brother. But potentially facing charges, one of his passengers admitted that something terrible happened back in Campbell County, Wyoming, one state over and nearly 200 miles away. So the information that you got out of those arrests and billings led you farther down now to Campbell County.
Correct. We had information within a short time that Wyoming on Highway 59.
His date is October 19, 1987. The time now is 9:58 a.m. It's a Monday morning.
Campbell County law enforcement went to the area.
I'm looking at the house from just south of the residence.
Approached the building
South of the house.
and went around to the backside and discovered Marty's body inside the old abandoned community hall there.
What condition was Marty in?
That was pretty rough. He'd been pretty severely beaten. I guess, to coin the term, his body had been dumped.
The body of an unidentified white male was located.
And it looked like they had backed up to an old doorway, kind of an entryway into this building, and really just pulled him out of the trunk and kind of in through the doorway.
Tire tracks right there. See the vehicles reach the building.
The door was on the opposite side of the building from the highway, so it wasn't going to be readily visible to anyone unless they actually went in and went around to the back side of the building.
What do you remember police telling you?
I just remember going to my knees and realizing that that was it, that was the outcome. It was no longer, we'll find him alive. That was the end of the hope. The hope and the light that you feel, that you just think this is bad, but it's gonna be okay. That was the moment that feeling and scenario left, and then it was, he's gone. If I had just gone with him, if I had just got the babysitter, if I had just made the effort to find a babysitter, if I had just gone with him that night, none of that would happen. And
This was never about you. Nothing that you did wrong or
I know.
going. And I think so often those that are affected start to think what they could have done to
what
change.
could I have done? What should I have done?
even though you logically knew?
You logically know, but emotionally, you have to live with it.
Marty's murder was a polarizing moment for the residents of Custer County, a community already haunted by the subtext of an age-old feud between Native Americans and the white settlers that displaced them from their ancestral lands. Wyatt Glade is the current Custer County attorney and was only 11 years old when Marty was murdered. He witnessed firsthand what it did to the town. What do you remember about the time of the crime?
That was just a really very tense time for Eastern Montana. And I think it was tense for everyone, but maybe especially for me. My father is Native American, and you can't step away from the role of race in this whole situation. All four of the people involved are Native American, and you've got Marty, he's a popular Caucasian, Eastern Montana boy. It's almost like it set us back.
But really what this is about is people. Doesn't matter their culture, where they're from, they look like. It's a murder issue that has a racial shadow.
Absolutely. We can talk about race and politics and cultural trends, but when you analyze a case, it's not about race, it's not about politics, it's not about culture, it's about justice.
Was a crime committed? And who committed it? And then can we prove it?
Exactly. And that's all that matters.
With the community on edge, police broadened their search for the remaining two suspects, Lester Kilsontop and Diane Bullcoming. And that same day, an anonymous tip led law enforcement towards a trailer in Billings, Montana. Inside, Lester Kilsontop and Diane Bullcoming. Once in police custody, Diane Bullcoming flipped on her friends in order for a lenient sentence. In exchange, she would tell police the truth about Marty's murder.
Diane said they were at a bar in Gillette, Wyoming, and they were discussing whether they needed to get rid of Marty or not.
He's beaten and kidnapped for hours, now days. Why now to murder?
They felt like they needed to get rid of him because of what they had done to him, that he would implicate them and they would get in trouble.
Where's Marty at that time?
Marty's in the trunk, and Marty was making noises in the trunk, trying to get somebody to notice him. He's in the trunk. And they were having a conversation. They agreed to killing Marty. However, Vern stayed at the bar, and Lester Kilsontop and Diane Bullcoming took Marty.
And they drive till they see this road, and they figure that's a good place. They go up the road and down this little valley where you couldn't see anything. And Diane says that Lester opened the trunk, and Marty was in there, and he was alive. And I'm sure in bad shape, but he was alive. And he took a couple rocks and tried to smash his head in, and that didn't work. Then he had a pipe, and the pipe was too long, and he couldn't really swing it well. So he went back to the rock and just kept pounding him until he thought he was dead.
But the former star athlete proved to be much stronger than they thought.
Lester had a bullet that you typically put in a gun and fire. Lester was holding that bullet with a pair of pliers and hitting it with something, trying to make the primer ignite and the bullet go off and to kill Marty that way, and was ultimately unable to do that.
So that's when Lester takes some fingernail clippers across his throat. And I don't know if that's what killed him or the combination of everything, but he was dead.
How long was this route that they took?
Vern and Lester traveled over 100 miles with Marty.
But over 100 miles.
Yes.
the terrible, clumsy fashion in which he was ultimately murdered, the amount of mental and physical suffering, just incomprehensible.
I think back in various summations when I've actually taken the 2 or 3 minutes in a strangling, for example, to stop and let the jury know how long 2 or 3 minutes can actually be when someone knows that they're losing their life. And for Marty, it was hours, it was days.
It's too much for one person to go through. The real heartbreaking part of it is from Doretta's interview. She mentions Marty explaining to them that he had a wife and young children and that he had a lot of money. And he offered them everything if they would just let him go, and they didn't. It's sad.
He told them he would give them anything they wanted. Just he needed to get home to his little babies. He just loved his family so much that I know in those moments when he was fighting for his life, he wasn't fighting for himself. He was fighting for his children.
It's a lasting comfort for Johnny Etchemendy, who was forced to grow up without his father. You're 34 now, Johnny. And this man who you may not have had a lot of actual memory, that the only thing that he was thinking about in his last moments was you, your mom and your brother.
Yeah. I always knew, like, people told me that family was the most important thing to him. And again, it's one thing to know this academically. It's another thing to see that those are his final thoughts. All that mattered was getting home to us. I'm not married, I don't have kids of my own. It's hard to really frame something else in my life that's that important. I don't know what my final thoughts would be if I was in his situation. But to know that it was me and my mom, my brother, it's just, there was no way to forget that.
Once someone's body's been discovered, there always is the identification. But that wasn't you. You were not the person asked to go identify Marty.
No. The mortician in Miles City, upon seeing Marty's body, suggested that nobody come to see him because of the condition that it was in. Since that time, I wished I had. But in the moment, I guess it was too much.
Prosecutors began assembling the case against Marty's alleged killers, using Diane's confession as a cornerstone. But as I learned in my years with the Brooklyn DA's office, it usually takes more than one testimony to secure a murder conviction, especially one proffered in exchange for leniency. According to Diane Bullcoming, Lester killed Marty. What they needed now was the additional evidence to prove it.
The police and the FBI came up with different evidence. There was everything from hair samples to the .22 shell to the vice grips to the rocks that they found with blood on them. And then there was his clothing. And it was a smell of death. It was terrible. I can't explain how terrible it was. All I know is a couple times it darn near put us in tears.
It reminds you that this isn't evidence and words. This is about somebody's life.
Right. And from the evidence that came together, and we knew Diane was telling us the truth.
8 months later, prosecutors had accumulated over 100 pieces of evidence.
There hit a point that you say, together with your partner, now it's time for prosecution.
Yes.
Whether you're in Brooklyn or Billings, prosecutors always feel the added pressure of a high-profile case. But for Dennis Corbin, the weight on his shoulders was immeasurable. Racial tensions were high. His key witness was also an accomplice. And on top of that, he was trying his first homicide case. A daunting task, only amplified by the personal responsibility he felt to his friends. The question remained, was he ready?
This room, yes.
This was the first murder case. I mean, this was the murder case here in Miles City. How did that impact the pressure you felt when you came into this room?
I was really nervous, just scared we were going to do something wrong. We knew that taking on this responsibility.
The defendant and their supporters.
Yes, that's correct.
The decision was made by you and your partner to enter separation agreements.
That's correct.
I mean, as prosecutors, I certainly myself have been in those situations that I know it's an unpopular decision that I've had to make when I've entered into some of these, but I know for my case that's the only way. But Diane Bullcoming, I mean, she was not only with them, I mean, sure. Think back to the trial. Was there any one hurdle or challenge that you were most worried about?
If anything, it would be whether the jury would believe Diane Bullcoming. She was with those two boys that killed the guy, and she's involved. And, you know, it was brought out she's getting a plea agreement, too.
People just, they don't quite get that. You're never asking them to like her. You don't expect them to. She's not someone they should want to have
That's
over
true.
their home. It's just whether they one of the most brutal in many ways.
It was.
The method upon method that they prosecutors, we have different styles in the way that we got it. But you made a very unusual decision about the way you closed in this case.
You know, I couldn't think of anything. And then I decided, why don't I just do it in the first person I did? It's the only time in my legal career that I've ever been emotional.
What was it that you think got to you so significantly?
And I think that's what basically upset me is, you know, God, he really did go.
Cooperation, Diane Bullcoming was given 40 years.
You just thought, okay, this is done. Then you can find the light after dark moments. You know, there's always that place in your heart where it hides. There's always that place where your loved one is there. You never forget them. And you can go there. And there's those moments when I still cry.
In for a penny, in for a pound.
Exactly. And in Vernon's case, he participated throughout the entire trial, and he simply wasn't there at the end.
And basically, unless someone renounces that they are no longer a participant, and that's where you come in.
Yeah.
Vernon used this technicality to lessen his sentence, which made him immediately eligible for parole. Most homicide cases, there are appeals, some are routine, some are more, but this has taken on so much more. Like for you, having it just still, after 32 years, it's
there and in walks Vernon. They just bring him and they sit him on a chair right next to the pulpit. And so I'm standing at this pulpit and is literally on a chair where I could put my hand on his shoulder if I so wished.
Years later, to work the way that you do on this case.
We tend to focus so heavily on the rights of the defendant. Not doing our job.
It's a case that still looms down. But while Marty's murder will never be forgotten, his true legacy will not be the life he lost, but the life he gave. Hearing the many stories about your father with you, he sounds like the dad every little child wishes for. Tell me about that legacy and its meaning to you.
I knew that I was so much like him. I'm 2.5, almost 3.